Hi, and welcome to our show today. I'm very excited to have a very dear friend here. She's very young and very accomplished because she's been working in the private sector and the federal government and trying to attack some of the major problems that we have in communities now. So today we're going to be talking about community development. And I would like to introduce you to her, Melissa Whelan. I call her Mel Well. And the reason for that is because she and Penny Chelius are good friends, and they call her Pen Chell. So here's Mel Well. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Karon. We will refrain from all the nicknames we have for you.
Yeah, I have plenty of nicknames.
Thank you for having me on the show today to discuss some very important things in this world and things that I hold very near to my heart.
Whatever got you interested in this line of work to begin with? I mean, your education geared you toward it, but did you know that that's where you were going when you started?
So funny you ask me, Karon, because when I originally started to go to school, I wanted to go into teaching, and then that led into social work. And I was working downtown for this woman who had more social service background. And she started teaching me the ropes of the commercial industry, community development, affordable housing, and what you could do through that and still have a very lucrative career. And when I got involved in that, then I kind of started to see at a high level what you can do to build up a community and what it really takes to build up a community. It's not just some philanthropic thought. It's not just money, it's a lot of things. And so when I decided to go that route, I switched my major and kind of took this turn of, I went from, I'm in college working at this job for these very successful people to, they mentored me to become one of those very successful people that led me to truly going into community development.
But now, talking about you personally, you went to college and paid for it yourself. You've accomplished a lot of things on your own.
Yeah.
So you've showed other people that they could do this without any help, right?
I did. I worked full time. I went to college full time. I was 4.0, graduated magna cum laude, inducted into the who's who. I did all of that on my own. I mean, along the way you meet people that are inspirational to you, but it was my dream to do this. It was kind of like my destiny, my calling since I was a kid. My parents both came from backgrounds where they worked really hard to stay middle class, and but their parents grew up in the Great Depression, so they grew up poor. And sometimes you don't even know where you're going to live. You don't know where you're going to eat. And back then, community development kind of started. That's when FHA and HUD got created, was during the Great Depression. So, you know, it goes back that far into, I want to give back and be thankful for how far my family brought, basically paved the way for me to work hard to give back and teach people how it can be done, not to just depend on everybody else, but it really starts with your family. It starts with you. It starts with them believing in you. So, yeah. And so I'm at a point where I did it all on my own with the help of a community, right, of people that cared about me. And so that is where my heart and my career is going, giving back to the people that are disinvested in.
So your title now is what?
So I work for the U.S. government in community planning and development, and I am a federal grant. I audit federal grants, I give federal grants, I mentor the executive directors, the vice presidents of nonprofits and municipalities.
Quite a job these days.
It sure is.
So where do we start explaining to the public exactly what is involved?
So, you know, when you really think about communities, you think about a lot of different things. And you think about economic development, you think community development, you think, you think, what is it going to take to be a thriving community? So let's just say, you know, where where I grew up, where other people grow up, and just for instance, right now, when we think of all the disinvestment going on in the city of Chicago, right? How many, shootings there are. How does that community get to that level? And it's just kind of taken for granted that those things happen in these disinvested areas, these low income areas. And then we take a place like Highland Park, right? 4th of July, Highland Park was attacked, and it was the end of the world, which was awful what happened. But that's not a community that built itself on things that are going to happen like that, right? Highland Park is a thriving community. It is a tight-knit community, and when you think about it, it's tight-knit by similar people, similar religion, similar economics, right? A lot of people in Highland Park are doctors, lawyers. They're wealthy. So when you have wealth and you have similar religion and you have similar age groups, you would have similar need. You come together and it's a magnet. So that builds that community, and so when there's something off, right? What just happened? It throws the equilibrium off, and it messes with the system. So now you have to really think about, how are you going to go back to these communities and not have these things happen in any community, and what the need is. And so that's where I come in, right? That's what I do. I help actually, I've worked in this private sector, which I got investors to build into low to moderate income communities to give them decent housing. So when you have a place to live, you're not worrying, where am I going to live next, right? And then there comes, economic development when you need people to build a hospital, right? And you need to have people that are going to work in that hospital, to come to that hospital.
Which is where I was at Mount Sinai.
Where you are, right.
Yeah.
And you worked in a disinvested community.
Right.
And you had people, right? So the caliber of your education, of the kind of person you are, you were brought to that community to show you some things and to show them some things, right? And it comes down to compassion. It comes down to, you took that step for that knowledge and that oath, that vow as a medical professional to give back to anybody and to save anybody's life, not just certain individuals. And so you're showing a different demographic equity, right?
Well, it was a big culture shock for me because I came from a very nice neighborhood.
Right.
And
So did
was
I.
but I went there because my family doctor said go there because you'll see every kind of trauma, every kind of illness, every kind of everything in that community. So
yeah, you will. And so, and you saw what was there. You saw the need of so many different things, right? So when you are living in fear that you don't know where you're going to live next week, you're living in fear, you don't know where you're going to eat, you don't know if you can have a doctor's appointment in the next 2 weeks, a month. When you're living in this kind of situation, it produces you to almost be reactionary, right? You're in survival mode versus trying to thrive and grow as a person. So this is where the government kind of comes in, as of what I'm doing right now. But previous to working for the federal government, I worked for the state government, and I helped build small businesses. So small businesses is a huge part of a community. They're the ones that are the backbone, right? You had your own personal business. You knew what that was like, how to build, give back to the community, invest in the women and the men and the people that may not have been so poor, but not have been so rich.
I had everybody from the poorest to the wealthiest.
So you understood all different generations. You had to understand where they're coming from, what their need was, what their availability was for payment. You had to understand their insurance. There's a lot of things that go with understanding how people live and what they can actually give back. So that was one of the things that I did. So I went from being on the private side where it was all about money, giving into getting people to invest in these communities to make money, right? But you're still giving back. And they're great people, And then it goes into, I worked for, going into working for state government, that you're on the cusp, right? You're following the statutes and the rules, the regs, but you're also given a little bit more autonomy to, giving back to different types of communities via small business. So women, minorities, veterans, people that really have already been a public servant, given back. Now they want to create something for themselves to give back. So I worked on that side too. And then it kind of led me into working for the government. And now I get to see it from a bird's eye view, right? I mean, you're looking at it from all different types of groups. I mean, there's 20 different plus definitions of homelessness. People don't even realize.
20.
Yeah.
Well, I know there's some that want to remain homeless because they like it. There's some that are mentally ill and can't change it. There's some that used to be brought to the psychiatric unit. There were some that were brought to the police station.
Yeah.
But what are some of the reasons?
Some of the reasons, like you just stated, some people are chronically homeless, right? They're in and out of shelters. They, have addiction problems. They have mental health issues. So they may go to a mental health facility. Other people are barely making it and living on friends' couches, right? There's that generation, which I see a lot of young people today. That's their generation. They're living in mom and dad's basement. They're couch surfing. They're getting in a little trouble. They're not finding their way. It's really difficult for young people today, especially right now during COVID, right? It's thrown us for a loop. That's a whole other dynamic and dichotomy of what the government's trying to do. Now there's COVID grant money to, that some of these individuals can, obtain, the municipalities, nonprofits, et cetera, to help people that are suffering from COVID. I mean, this goes down from like the big ones, right, all the way down to the rural areas, with the natives, right? So you're talking villages, all the different villages of Illinois, right? Where are we at? Village of Villa Park, right? All the way to the village of, Hoffman Estates.
Well, you almost went to Indian reservations.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I started to, because we're parallel. We're an arm of the Native American, group called ONAP in the federal government, and we partner with them. And so some of our rural communities that get grants actually have Native Americans and reservations, Native American reservations. So I almost joined their group permanently to deal with the Native Americans and all of their needs. And I would have gone to the reservations to visit them, and they have their own set of rules. So I would have to learn NASDA law. And, they have their own way of doing things, and they have, treaties with the government and et cetera. So, but back to, there's multiple different definitions of homelessness, which lead to multiple different types of grants. So you have permanent housing, you have transitional housing from a transition of, a mental facility to an actual apartment. You have rapid rehousing, which is usually a domestic violence grant, right, for people suffering domestic violence, and that goes sometimes along with mental illness, right?
You got halfway houses.
They grew up right that way. So, there's all kinds of great organizations that deal with strictly homelessness and mental illness and veterans, right, who are homeless, which is awful. But, there's other different alliances that we work with that, some of the suburbs are almost, all their veterans are almost housed, right? That's huge. They're doing a lot of outreach. They're doing a lot of, going out to the communities, and actually, they used to do this prior to COVID, and now they're kind of starting to go back and do it in a different fashion. But, it's easy to do these things a lot more now because we have an intake system. So when you have an intake system, let's just say somebody's in a mental health care facility for 2 months and they need somewhere to live. Well, now they're put in a system, and it's going to alarm all the partners, all the different nonprofits and groups across the city of Chicago, the suburbs, wherever they're at. Hey, this person has this demographic. They need a place to live. They have 3 children. They want to live in Portage Park. So somebody, it's going to ding, it's almost like a real estate group, right? It's going to pop up, oh, and we have availability with this landlord. Bring them our way, we'll interview them and see if they qualify. So that we have that, and then we have the villages where we're building an entire community through our grants. So those are called community development block grants, where they get to, they have all different activities, all the way down from, an ADA handicap ramp to lights to the streets to, working with homeless projects like a PADS or, like an agency to build into the community. So they have to follow the regs and the rules. But we monitor them, we answer questions for them, we audit them, assist in questions.
Well, how do they get a hold of you? Through social service offices?
So they have an organization that they go through that covers the entire umbrella, right? So we're the federal government, we give money to these villages. Or the villages also work with the state, and then they work with the county, right? So the money trickles down, right? But if they apply through a consortium, through, so Northwest, let's just say, there's a consortium of Northwest, all the different northern suburbs, Schaumburg, Palatine, Hoffman Estates, Des Plaines, they're part of this consortium group through Cook County still part of Cook County, that they all apply together. And then they get pieces of the grant. And then it goes to each of their villages. And then, so they get this as an umbrella, and then the consortium goes through the government and applies for the actual huge grant. So it's kind of like this umbrella, and it layers. So then the homeless organizations kind of have the same idea. They're called a COC, a Continuum of Care Grant, and they actually do them every year, and they have to apply every year. And it's kind of like the races, right? You have to have a grant writer, you got to give us your mission.
Yeah, where do you ever find a grant writer? I've never met a grant writer.
Oh, there's lots of grant writers.
Really?
That's a huge thing in government. It's a huge thing in nonprofit. Any type of, banks have them. You have to really, it's almost like writing a story. You got to give their mission statement. You got to give, your financials. You have to say
like
what you want to do. Like a business plan. Mm-hmm. And then they say, this is what we're going to do, and we're paralleling our mission with you, government, and what you guys want to do and we want to do. Mm-hmm. And this is how we go about it. So there's a process. There's different ways to go about it, but, sometimes you just got to join up and be a sub-recipient of somebody else instead of trying to get your own. It just depends what you really want to do.
And then how do they prove that they've used it for what they said it's going to happen?
So that's where I come in. I do the checks and balances. They have to submit reports. We do more reviewing of reporting. They have to report their activities, what they've done. We can't tell them exactly how to use their money, but we can tell them what you can and what you can't do. Mm-hmm. So we can't tell them, you need to fix this road. But they may have it in their plan that is what they want to do. Or, you need to have this program. Well, they can do it, but, we can't tell them. So, every couple of years also, we go through a season called monitoring where they're actually audited, and you have to look at client files, you have to look at their financials, you have to look at their audits, single audit. You have to look at all of those things to see what exactly.
Well, like I went to an event the other day, there were almost 1,000 people there. It was the Senior Services of DuPage, and everybody donated $5 for dinner, and so they didn't pay for the whole thing, but they had the banquet hall, they had the staff, gave everybody a box of food to take home so that they'd have food in case of an emergency, like cans of soup and things like that.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing then you say, well, okay, what did you do? And they show you what they did.
So
right?
That would be more under the activities. Mm-hmm. So there's different, there's different things that they can use it for. So all they have to do is just say, like there's different programs, right? Like there's different types of senior programs, and they can say, hey, we had this program that affected these seniors and this group, and this, this age range and this economic status range, and et cetera.
And that was everybody. There was such a diverse group. There were people like from India. There were people from black neighborhoods. There were people from white. There were people from, I was sitting next to a Korean who was in the Korean War, by the way. It was very interesting.
That's a
So
interesting-
everybody was there. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, there's all kinds of ways to get involved. You know, they have a lot of volunteers. You know, what I do, you really have to understand the regulations and the rules to make it work. But, you know, what these individuals do for these different, I really want to call them victims, right? They're victims of, somebody else's mental health. They're victims of somebody else's lack thereof care, or some of them are sick, right? Some of them were thriving and they got cancer and lost everything, and some of them it's just by their own merit, right? Some of them, like you said, they just don't want to, have that hope that they have a house and the responsibility, and then it's gone in a year or two. Because some of these things, they don't last forever, unless you go through the process of getting a voucher. So that's through the Department of Housing in a different way. You can get, a housing voucher that's lasts for so long. But we're talking grants. We're not talking vouchers, housing vouchers. That's a different program.
So are you dealing with the people that are coming over the border now and coming here?
So some of the organizations, they do have refugees. So I do look at the reports and they will say, we had 4 refugees, 5 refugees, and we can't tell them yes or no because it's really up to them and, in their actual, resources for their organization. So, and a lot of them bring parents and their children back together. They'll talk about that, right? Reuniting some of them. But yeah, I think that is going to be something we're going to see more of in the future, what's going on in the political climate right now.
So do people apply? I mean, I know that there's housing and federal housing, but there's also places it seems that you send people that are private housing too. Do people do that? I mean, do they register rooms for people to come and stay in?
So private housing, I don't know where you're going with that, but so that's really more the landlord. So there's different types, right? So you can get a tenant-based voucher, just you. And then you can get a actual housing voucher, for the actual property, right? So this property can be deemed as Section 8 or it can be deemed as low to moderate income. And then everyone that lives there will have a voucher, right? And it's just deemed that this is low income housing. But if you're tenant based, so then you can actually get it yourself. And if the landlord, accepts it, you can pay a certain amount with that voucher, and then the other person in that building pays it's based off your income, The only thing I would say is, if they're, especially during COVID when they could not go to the homeless shelters because they were too congested, they would rent hotels for them, and hotels would have a, some kind of, disclosure with the municipality and say, hey, we got a grant that we can allow people that are homeless to stay at your hotel for X amount of days until the pandemic, is deemed, over or appropriate enough for people to conjure under one roof. So. But yeah, but private homes, they're not going to arrange it for somebody, for you to then, be fostering a family. That's really more the charity. So just for instance, just take a Catholic Charities. They may do that on their own. Families may adopt and foster a family, but that's not something that HUD or the government does with their grants. That's something that maybe the organization may do on their own.
Does Catholic Charities get money from the government?
Well, they get grants.
Yeah.
They apply for grants. I mean, all of these charities do, a lot of charities apply, majority. So that's just kind of how it breaks down, right? So that's how anything is done. So, the city works with banks, and then the banks work with developers, and you want to create this affordable housing building for people in this area based on income. You're getting TIF funds from the city, you're getting a grant from the government, you're getting a loan, a bridge loan from a bank, and you're getting all these separate areas of funding.
Could you explain to us what a bridge loan is and the other thing you called it, a SIF or DIF?
A TIF.
A TIF?
TIF funds.
What's that?
Not CDIF.
I was going to say.
TIF funds is it's like a fund that the city of Chicago has for each district. So each alderman will apply for TIF funds. It's called tax increment funding. They'll apply for these funds to help build the economic status of their community. So they have to prove, so they have to go through all of the people that live there, the amount of money that they make, the amount of small businesses, the amount of lack thereof and disinvestment there is, and say, hey, we have these businesses that we can possibly XYZ do things with. We need your TIF funds.
Like a grocery store or something?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
for instance, I was a part of a project that they were building a Whole Foods in Inglewood, right? So I went through the city of Chicago, we went through banks, we went through, different investors, and we worked with all kinds of people, right, to get this done. And then I was actually at the bank I worked at, actually did the bridge loan. A bridge loan is just kind of like getting you from A to C, and we're B. We're giving you that bridge to then fill the gap that you didn't get through all your other sources, whether it was private funding, grant money, TIF funds from the city, raising money on your own, private funding, a donation from a private donor. A lot of these foundations, these big ones, right, like the MacArthur Foundation, et cetera, they donate a lot of money to big projects that are going to build communities.
So we have about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
So what would you like to tell people in that 3 minutes that I haven't asked you?
Well, Karen, it basically boils down to, what it is, how are you going to make your community better, right? I can sit here all day and say, it's grants, it's this, it's business people, it's money, it's everyone. And you have to play your part, right? You can't just sit and wait for resources to come to you. That's what it's kind of happening because people are so, they're just so discouraged from COVID, and they're so discouraged from the climate going on. And, they're so focused on things that we already kind of had fixed, right? As a nation, as a people, and you're going backwards. And so my advice is, for one, don't be ashamed if you do need help, because there are tons of resources out there for people to obtain, to get help with their mortgage. There's tons of things, even if you're not, shuffling the streets, poor.
Well, where do you go? To the bank? To the social service?
There's tons, right? You could even go to the state. Like IDA has a lot of grants for people that are just struggling to pay their mortgage, right? The Cook County has a lot of things that are helping people, bridge the gap of, I can't pay my mortgage this
Do
month.
you go to your alderman?
You can go to your alderman. Yeah. You can go to your district. You can go to, you just can't run up to me at the federal government at HUD, right? So we're kind of the, the bird's eye view. We're the stop before headquarters, right? So I'm at the field office level, but we handle things before it goes to headquarters, and then we're the kind of the in between. Headquarters comes to us, we meet with them, and then we meet with the executive directors of the programs for the communities that we're involved in. So for me, don't be ashamed. There's a program out there for literally everyone. I had this conversation with a good friend of mine, and she's a medical professional, and she's like, the great thing about America is they have assistance for everyone. You go to Europe, they don't. There's not a lot of handicap accessibility. There's not a lot of anything. Here, there is a fund, a group, a nonprofit, something for everyone.
Well, thank you for convincing us. This is our last minute. We've been talking to Melissa Whelan, and she's given us some good information about how you need to get out in your community and all the
get
things you
involved.
might find that might even help you.
Yeah.
So you never know. Thank you for joining us. I'm Karon Gibson, and we will see you next time. Thank you for joining us. Bye.